Hello, hello. How's it going? I see somebody's here. We're in the middle of the day and somebody is here watching. Welcome, welcome. If you're here live, hashtag live. If you're here watching the replay, hashtag replay. And I am so, so glad that you're here. And if you joined us yesterday, you heard all about my story and how I broke free and started traveling the world. And I promised you that today I would be going live to share with you the setbacks that I faced because by no means was this an easy journey at all. This was very, very, very challenging, and it began at the very beginning when I was thinking, I can't do this. There's no way that I can do this. And I want to share with you what I was thinking during those times of thinking this really is impossible. There's no way. And I want to share with you exactly the three things that were the most challenging part of breaking free and traveling the world. So, without further ado, well, I also want to mention if you haven't seen the first video where I talked about my journey of breaking free and traveling the world, then go ahead and go to my Facebook profile and you'll see it right there on my newsfeed. And I hope you enjoy it if you watched it. And I highly suggest if you're watching this video and you're interested in this one that you go back and watch the first one as well. So let's get right into it. Let me begin to share my setbacks. So there were three major setbacks that I had when I started to think about transitioning into this lifestyle of traveling around the world. And really, the first decision, if you watched the previous video that you heard about, is that the very first decision I made was to break free and move to Hong Kong to teach English abroad for 1 year. That was the first um, decision that I made. So I knew that I would be away for 1 year. Um, but before any of that ever happened, I was thinking, like, okay, I need to get away from my job. I'm not going to continue living my life like this. I'm not going to keep staring out the window and just wishing for a better life. I'm going to take action. I'm going to make something happen. I know I need to change my environment. But I was so broke. I didn't have any money. And maybe some of you can relate to that because maybe if you're watching this video, you're like me and you grew up in a family where you had to start supporting yourself from a young age and you just kind of got into this rhythm of like making money, paying the bills, making money, paying the bills, and it's really, really hard when you're, trying to just make ends meet to even imagine saving up for anything because you're just worried about paying the rent and paying food and maybe any extra cost you have. So just to give you an idea, I had graduated from university and I was in my first desk job. Um, and I was making more money than I had ever made before, but it still wasn't enough to it still didn't feel like enough to really like start making any type of savings because I still felt like I was paying a lot of things. I had just started paying my student loans, and there were a lot of things that I had to pay for. But so my spending habits changed when, like one day, they changed, and they changed for a particular reason. And that reason is because I made a decision. I made a decision that I was going to teach English abroad. I told myself and I made that decision and I started telling other people too. And once I made that initial decision and it really became real for me, figuring out how I was going to pay for it and start saving the money and making a budget to make that happen became way easier because now I had a vision, I had a goal that I could work towards. And it didn't feel like, okay, I'm going to make the money and then I'm going to decide to do it. It was like I decided to do it and then I'm going to figure out a way to get there. And maybe you've heard the phrase before, begin with the end in mind. So I always suggest to the clients that I work with that the very first thing that you should do is not focus on how you're going to make the money to do this. The very first thing that you should focus on is planning your travel dream. Because when you plan your travel dream, that's going to give you the fuel and that's going to give you the fire to start figuring out how you're going to pay for it, right? So I'll tell you a little bit more about my story there. So I made a decision to teach English abroad, and then I was like, okay, well, I definitely am gonna need a bit of savings before I just like move all the way to Hong Kong. So I told myself that I would make $5,000 in savings before I took off for my trip. And that was like a lot of money for me. That was so much money. I don't think I'd ever saved like that much ever in my life. Maybe like $1,000 or $2,000. And some people are really great at saving and you learn it from a young age, but like I had mentioned before, I had started paying for things at like since I was 15 years old, trying to pay the rent, the bills and everything and the food. So there was never really a chance to start a savings, right? I was always just kind of survival. But then I really shifted. I really shifted and I was like, okay, $5,000 is my goal and I'm going to make that amount no matter what before June was when my TEFL course started. So I said, by June, I'm going to make that amount. And I had given myself, it was about 5 months that I had to make that $5,000. So, so what did I do? How did I make that $5,000? Well, I was, like I said, I was making more money than usual at my new job. And so I was able to tuck away a tiny bit of that paycheck. But I also started taking up side jobs and I actually became an Uber driver and it was like the most fun, epic experience ever. So I looked for other ways to make money. I looked for side jobs and I looked for opportunities just to make a couple extra dollars. And every time I made just a couple extra dollars, I tucked it away and I put it right towards that $5,000 savings goal. And there it was. By the time that I was ready to set out for my TEFL course, I had $5,000 in my bank account, which I never ever had a savings before. But it was that conviction of saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to travel to abroad and have an amazing new experience. And that feeling of like, okay, I'm really going to do this. And this is something I'm really excited about and I really love. So I'm going to make a way to make it happen, right? Okay. So number one was money, and I hope that that explanation helped. And if you're somebody who is having a really tough time with money, which is huge, which is a very, very challenging part of doing this, of breaking free and traveling the world for any amount of time that you decide to do, then I suggest that you do two things. Number one is that you choose a date. Choose a date that you are going to take off for your adventure. Once you just choose a date, that is going to move mountains, okay? And if you're listening to this and you actually want to choose a date for your takeoff for your journey, then message me with your date and I will be so glad to hear from you. And you could also choose your return date as well. I think that helps us sometimes. So if you're going to plan like a 6 month adventure, then you could say like, okay, I'm going from May to I think that would be November. Actually, it's really funny. One of my friends just signed up for a course that I'm doing on how to break free and travel the world. And let me read her message because it just embodies exactly what I'm talking about. So uh, she said she was worried about doing the trip for 6 months. She says, I was like, okay, so are you officially in? And she says, oh no, I'm nervous. I'm thinking beginning of November to beginning of May. Can I do the trip for less time than 6 months? I said, you ultimately choose how long you want to do the trip for, but I highly suggest that you do it for at least 6 months. And she says, ha ha ha, I just need to get over this hump. Okay, perfect. I'll leave in November and I'll come back in May. And I said, yes, oh man, this is huge because she just made her convictions. And then she says, yay, holy cow, I can't wait to plan. So just to demonstrate to you how much that moves you, it moves you emotionally, it moves you physically to start doing what you need to do to make that trip happen, right? Including all of the finances. I have much more advice on finances, and I'm going to do a whole nother video about that, about how traveling the world, if you decide to do it full time, can actually save you tons of money. This lifestyle is way cheaper than if I was to decide to actually live in the US. So I'm going to do a whole video on that at a different time. But I just wanted to give you those two tips. So just a reminder, number one, choose a date. Make a conviction and tell yourself, this is the date where I'm setting off for my adventure. And if you'd like, even choose a return date. So you know, like, these are the days that I'm going. And that really makes your trip like real. Okay, that's number one. And number two, don't think about the finances yet, but just start planning your travel dream. Start thinking about the countries that you want to visit. Start thinking about the people that you want to visit. Start thinking about if there's a special thing that you want to do, like an event or climbing a mountain or anything that there is out there to do, to explore. If you have something on your mind that is just calling your name, start there. Start planning your travel dream, and then the second step is going to be to start planning your finances. So, all right, so that was setback number one. I hope that was helpful. And my setback number two. Okay, this is a big one. It might resonate with some of you, and others it might not resonate at all, but this was huge for me. So, setback number two is that when I first started thinking about breaking free and traveling the world, I had a precious dog, and she was literally the love of my life. She was my cuddle buddy. She was, uh, if you talk to any of my friends, they'll tell you. Even if you look at my Facebook profile, you will see me like holding her in my arms, and like, she was my absolute best friend, and she meant everything in the world to me. And I could just not even bear the thought of having to give her up. Definitely not forever, but even thinking about even finding somebody to watch her was like breaking my heart. But you know, I had to like really consider, is my dog, is this worth it? Like, just a dog? I mean, not just a dog, she's an amazing creature and she was a huge comfort to me. But I had to think, like, what is going to impact my life more? Moving abroad and teaching English and breaking free and having incredible new experiences and traveling the world, or staying home with my dog? And this decision, this was just, honestly, I said money is number one, which it was, but this is a very close follow, because if it was just heartbreaking. I spent so many days crying over this and trying to figure out what to do and worrying, and finally I said, okay, I'm going to get somebody to watch her. I don't know who's going to watch her for a whole year, but whoever decides to watch her, I'm going to pay, all of her dog food, and do the best I can to make sure that this person, wants to watch her, and that they're going to take good care of her. And one of my really good friends, she was so kind. The world aligned, and she offered to take care of Karma, of my dog. And she was just such an amazing soul to do that. She said, "Okay, I'm thinking about getting a dog, so I think if I take care of Karma for the year, then it will give me a good idea if I really want to get a dog in the future." And that was just like the sweetest thing that anyone did for me ever, I want to say, because that was like a huge part of this journey. So Laura, she took Karma for the whole year. That was so kind of her. And I kept in touch, and I was able to video call with Karma, and I missed her so much. But it was so worth it finding somebody to watch her and to take care of her, because I mean, I was halfway across the world just meeting new people and having amazing adventures. And my dog was very well taken care of. And dogs, like, they love their owners, but if as long as a dog is well taken care of, a dog is happy, they do miss their owners, but as long as there isn't a problem in the home, and as long as they're getting exercise and they're getting loves and everything that they need, then they're really happy. And Karma was so happy, and she also was so happy when I came home and I got to give her a huge hug and cuddle with her, and it was also amazing to be reunited with her. But if you have an animal or a pet, I understand how huge of a setback that is to breaking free and traveling the world, because that was exactly where I was at. So, what I suggest to you, if you have a pet and you're thinking about, taking a trip that's around 6 months or maybe a bit longer, is that number one, you really need to weigh out what's going to be worth it for you. Because maybe for you, it is better to stay at home and be with your pet, and that's totally fine and a good decision that you need to make. And maybe for you, it's then you're going to make the decision that you're going to find somebody who really can take care of your pet, and then in that case, you're going to start making moves to help make sure that you're going to find the right person to take care of your animal, and start setting things up so that they have enough food and they have everything that they need while you're away, right? And that maybe that person is so kind to send you pictures and stay in contact about your animal when you're gone. All right, so that was number two. Number two, setback. The third setback is one that weighs really heavy on my heart, and it's a personal story, so bear with me here. So the third setback is family, and family can be really challenging, and also friends maybe. For me particular, it was family, because my family situation was not good at all at the time being, and it was very unstable, and there was a lot of things going on, and that perhaps was one of the reasons why I wanted to get away so badly, and why I wanted to change my environment, which later you can process, and I processed and dealt with. But so yeah, so the family situation was really unstable. Just to give you an idea, my mom was really sick. She had been sick for many years, and I always had a fear of my mom passing away. But when I thought about going away for a whole year, that fear became way stronger and way more intense. And I really thought that, like, if I went away for a year, she was going to die during that year, and I would have tons of regrets and be really messed up psychologically, honestly. I was really worried about this situation with my mother, and that can be a really challenging thing to deal with if you have family members who are sick, and who might need your support. And so this is a really tough one, and you really need to think about this carefully, because you need to assess your fear based on logic rather than based on emotion. I had been basing my fear of my mother passing away on emotion. Um, I had been having that fear for many years, and it never happened. So, um, I think when I look at that, I can see that was an emotional fear. And, it very well could have happened. And I'll continue to tell you the story now. So basically, I went to, had spent time with my family before I left, and I also made a plan with them. I made a plan to make sure that I stayed in contact with my mom, make sure I stayed in contact with other members of my family, to make sure that I stayed in the loop, and that everything that was going on, and also that if anything happened, I made an emergency plan that I would fly back home immediately if there was any major emergency. So I had those two things set up. I had number one, a plan to keep in touch, and number two, a plan to fly back home immediately if there was any problems at all. So, um, So the story goes, I flew to Hong Kong and I started teaching English. And after that, I started teaching English online and I traveled around Southeast Asia. And about 8 months into my trip, I was in Thailand and I remember I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand. If any of you have ever been to Chiang Mai, let me know in the comments if you've ever been to Chiang Mai, Thailand. It is a beautiful, beautiful place and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to visit Chiang Mai. So I was in this really, really nice hostel. Actually, I was doing the online teaching. I was working crazy hours, tons of hours, tons of classes. And one day, in the middle of all of that, my sister calls and she says, "Mom isn't doing so well. I think that you should give her a call." And I said, "Okay, I'll give her a call." And so I called my mom and she really wasn't doing well at all. And I had to convince her that she needed to go to the hospital and go get checked in because she was very, very sick. And after that phone call, I hung up and I opened up my laptop and I searched for the quickest flight home from Thailand. And keep in mind, I had to go from Thailand back to Hong Kong to pick up my extra luggage and then all the way back to the US. So this was like a 48-hour journey. Completely unexpected. And honestly, it was heart wrenching every step of the way. So, my worst fear came true. My mom actually got sick. She was very close to her death, and I had to make that immediate flight back. So, these things can happen, and it's really something that you need to consider. By the way, just so that you know, my mom's doing a lot better. Actually, after all of these years, she herself finally, her and I got together and I helped her to break free and travel the world. And now my mom, she bought a trailer and she's traveling all around the US in her trailer and meeting new people and having campfires and hiking mountains and she's just doing so much better and she's uh I could never even imagined that happening in my wildest dreams. And honestly, my mom really was all of the inspiration of being adventurous in the very first place. She was a very adventurous woman and she always took us on amazing adventures as children. So I'm sure that that's a huge reason why I love adventures too. So anyways, that's about my mom and basically don't forget. So here's the 2 tips on that setback, okay? Number 1, you really need to assess the fear of what might happen with your family or maybe your friends on a logical level rather than an emotional level. Because when you think about things on an emotional level, you might have fears that feel very real but might not really happen. uh, it's really hard to tell if something really is going to happen or not. But I highly suggest that you just assess your fears and really say, okay, is this something that really could happen, or is this a fear that I've had for a long time and it's unlikely? Um, so this is very, very important, and be careful with that decision because you really don't want to, take a trip if it's really not the right time. I mean, there are situations where you might have a family member and they really need you there and they really are sick and it's not a good time to take a trip. So you really need to take that into consideration. I would never ever tell somebody or suggest that you should take a trip if your family member is close to their close to death or they really really need your support. So be careful in that. And the second part of that is to make an emergency plan, okay? So you need to decide how you're going to stay in contact with your family and how you're going to stay in contact with maybe that loved one that is sick, and then also make an emergency plan of how you are going to get home immediately if there is a problem, okay? Okay, wow, that covers all 3 of my major setbacks. If anyone has any comments or questions, please, please write them in the chat. Sarah Tyler, working since 14. Yep. Yeah, I think, Sarah, if you're also a traveler, or, even if you're not. I think that a lot of us have had that experience of just leaving home really early and having to work from a young age, and that can impact our finances sometimes in a really good way of like having to learn things from a really young age, but it can also set us back of not having an example of like how to save or anything like that. So uh, glad to connect with you on that, Sarah. Gabe, hey, thank you for being here. I'm so glad you made it too. All right, I see there's some other people in here. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to chat with you. And also, you don't need to do that here in the live. You can also message me personally. I know this was a bit of a personal topic, so I'm comfortable with everything I talked about and happy to talk about it with you here in the comments. But if you'd like to message me personally, that would also be great. So so these were my three major setbacks. And tomorrow, no, not tomorrow, I'm sorry, Thursday. On Thursday, I'm going to go live again. And I'm going to talk about why traveling was the best decision I ever made and how it completely changed my life. And so that's going to happen on Thursday, and I really hope to see some of you there. I really hope that you've been enjoying these videos and that maybe it's helped inspire something within you that you've been thinking about. And please, if you want to talk, don't have any hesitations to reach out. I I want to help. I want to talk to you. So I think that's it for now. I'm going to sign off and just message me if you want to chat, okay? All right, guys, have a beautiful day. You can see the sun is coming in on my shirt. So I will talk to you on Thursday, okay? Take care.